Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast. Today, Chalmers dodged a spicy bullet, the high heat of Skinner's habitual heedlessness in the kitchen.
Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. Welcome once again to our humble podcast where the aromas of culinary catastrophes and administrative anecdotes fill the air. I am your host, Seymour Skinner.
And I'm your other half, your partner in crime, your superintendent, Chalmers. How are you doing today, Skinner?
I'm doing splendidly, Chalmers. Thanks for asking. It promises to be a delightful journey through the annals of our recent adventures, so buckle up and brace yourselves because this episode is one for the books.
Oh, do tell, Skinner. I'm always eager to hear about your latest escapades in the kitchen and beyond.
Well, as you all know, I have a penchant for exploring the world's cuisines from the safety of our very own kitchen. And let me tell you, our last adventure was quite the experience.
Oh, I remember that evening vividly. It was the night you decided to cook something exotic, something you swear was mild, but ended up being a culinary volcano that was goddamn spicy.
Yes, the Praja incident. A dish from the far reaches of gastronomy that I had read about in a rather bold cookbook. I thought it would be a harmless venture into spice territory.
Harmless? Harmless, my dear Skinner. If harmless was an option on the heat scale, we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Well, let's just say that my sense of mild and the actual definition may have been misaligned, but fear not, dear listeners, for today we shall recount the tale of how I, Seymour Skinner, accidentally turned our dining room into an active volcano. Or at least, something that resembled one.
It was quite the sight, Skinner. You were so determined to impress with your worldly culinary skills. Little did we know that it would lead to such an explosive outcome.
Now, Chalmers. Explosive is a strong word. Let's just say there was a vigorous release of energy. A lot of smoke and light, or what I thought at the time was steam. Very professional, I assure you.
Oh, the steam. Yes. It was more like a foghorn went off in our living room. I remember thinking, how does one become one with a dish? And there you were, looking like a mad scientist next to your cauldron of chaos.
Well, when I say steam, I meant the vapor that emanates from a pot of boiling water. You know, the usual. But let's not dwell on the technicalities just yet. We have plenty of time to dissect this fine specimen of culinary misadventure.
Indeed we do. And our listeners are on the edge of their seats, I'm sure, where they're probably munching on something less volatile as they listen to your tale of cooking woes.
Oh, I hope they're not eating anything too delicate. The last thing we want is for our podcast to incite a massive crumb collapses.
Well, Skinner, it seems you've set the stage quite magnificently. Let's lead our audience through the kitchen fiasco that only you could turn into a thrilling narrative.
Splendid. With that, dear listeners, we shall embark on this gastronomical roller coaster. Buckle up and hold on tight, because after this episode, you'll never look at a spice rack, or your kitchen stove for that matter, the same way again.
That's the spirit, Skinner. And remember, in Memifield, no culinary adventure is too bold, no administrative mishap too grand, and no roast too spicy.
Precisely, Chalmers. And with that, let the feast of words begin.
Indeed it does, my friend. Let's give them a story to remember.
All right, let's delve into one of the most peculiar evenings our household has ever experienced.
The night in question. It's like a fine wine. It gets better with every recounting. Let's not forget that this is the story of how Seymour Skinner, seasoned educator and amateur chef, attempted to cook what he believed to be a mild dish from an ancient recipe.
Yes, Chalmers, ancient being that I am, I ventured into the kitchen with the confidence of a Michelin-starred chef, if such chefs were known for their ability to spontaneously combust.
Oh, the anticipation is killing me. Our listeners are on the edge of their seats, waiting for the moment when your cooking prowess clashed with the fiery spirit of the project.
Indeed, it was a culinary earthquake waiting to happen, a dish that I, in my naivety, believed would be a delightful addition to our dinner collection.
And let's not forget the audience you inadvertently attracted with your, how shall we put this delicately, spicy endeavor. The neighborhood was buzzing with rumors of an exotic new attraction in Memifield.
Well, I never thought I'd become a meme, but who am I to deny the people what they desire?
It was quite the spectacle, Skinner. Your culinary misadventure became the talk of the town faster than you could say caution. Extremely spicy.
Yes, it was a humbling experience, to say the least. A reminder that sometimes less is more, particularly when less means not setting your kitchen ablaze.
Oh, Skinner, your kitchen has seen many a lesson learned moment, but this one takes the cake. Or should I say, the praja?
Indeed, it was a memorable lesson, one that taught me the importance of reading the fine print on a spice chart. Or any chart for that matter.
Now, let's set the scene for our listeners. You were so determined to impress, setting up what you envisioned as an intimate dinner experience. Little did you know your vision was about to get a fiery twist.
It was a night filled with anticipation and excitement. I had everything prepared, the table was set, the mood lighting was perfect, and the project was ready to be unveiled.
And by unveiled, you mean erupted into a cloud of spicy doom. I remember the look on your face when you first realized what you had done. It was a mix of shock, horror, and a touch of denial.
Well, it's not every day you realize that a pinch of spice translates to an apocalyptic level of heat in the real world.
Oh, the look on your face was priceless. It was like watching a cartoon character realize they've eaten a magic mushroom.
Yes, well, let's just say my culinary creativity took an unexpected turn that evening, but as we all know, every catastrophe is an opportunity in disguise.
Absolutely, Skinner, and through this podcast, you're turning your kitchen mishaps into a delicious tale of adventure and learning, or learning to not light your stove on fire, as some might call it.
Precisely. And with that, let us dive deeper into the heart of the project incident. We'll explore the humor in my frantic attempts to contain the situation and the lengths I went to in an effort to preserve my dignity, or at least what was left of it after the incident.
It's going to be a wild ride, Skinner. Our listeners are in for a treat as you recount your efforts to turn a disaster into a dinner worth remembering, or at least something less likely to cause third-degree burns.
Indeed, and as we navigate through this culinary catastrophe together, remember that in the world of Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast, every mistake is a lesson, and every lesson is a story waiting to be told.
And with that, let's keep the flames of comedy and the air conditioning running as we recount this spicy tale. Stay tuned, listeners, because what happens in the Skinner household doesn't always stay there.
That's right, Chalmers. So there I was in the heart of my kitchen, armed with nothing but a recipe card and an industrial-sized fan. The stage was set, the project was prepared, or so I thought, and our guests were due to arrive any moment.
The calm before the storm. You were like a general surveying his battlefield, ready for the feast to commence. Little did you know, your troops were about to mutiny.
Indeed, Chalmers. I was the picture of culinary confidence until the moment I took that first, let's call it culinary puff of the project.
And that's when pandemonium struck. Well, the smoke alarm, which had previously led a peaceful existence, decided to join the project in its flamboyant display of flavor, or more accurately, its lack thereof.
Yes, the smoke alarm became quite the star of the evening. It was like it could smell the impending disaster and wanted a piece of the action.
Oh, the symphony that ensued. The harmonious blend of sizzling spices and piercing alarms was something to behold. I'm sure our neighbors thought we were hosting an avant-garde performance art piece.
Avant-garde? Perhaps in a post-apocalyptic world where the only remaining sound is the screech of a smoke alarm and the cries of a man who's overdone his July.
Speaking of which, your attempt to salvage the situation was nothing short of heroic, or at least as heroic as one can be while wearing an apron and wielding a fire extinguisher.
Now, Chalmers, I may not have been in a firefighter's uniform, but I handled that situation with the utmost professionalism, or as much as one can must when their cuisine is turned into an active volcano.
Of course, Skinner. And let's not forget your innovative use of alternative cooking methods once the project had claimed the stove as its own. The fan-assisted heating method was unique.
Well, when life gives you a kitchen filled with hot air, you make the best of it, or so I told myself, as I served our guests their traditional meal atop the kitchen counter, under the gentle breeze of the fan.
It was quite the spectacle, a buffet line forming around the perimeter of our living room, and the main dish, a beautifully seared chicken breast, courtesy of the kitchen's ventilation system.
Yes, our guests were quite the good sports about it. They laughed, they joked, and they politely pretended that the taste of hot air was exactly what they had been craving.
Dear, let's not forget the condiments you used to flavor the project. Ketchup as a stand. In for tomato sauce, mayonnaise in place of coconut milk. You really went above and beyond in your quest for culinary creativity.
Well, when you're dealt a hand as peculiar as this, one must improvise. It was either that or admit defeat and call for pizza, which, incidentally, I did in the end.
A true test of character, Skinner. And it's not every day you get to witness a culinary expert at work, using nothing but pantry staples and a healthy dose of improvisation.
Indeed, it was a night of firsts for me, the first, and hopefully last, time I've ever used ketchup as a substitute for an authentic spice blend.
Ah, the memories. It's like we were there experiencing the fiery embrace of the project firsthand. Your quick thinking and good humor turned what could have been a disaster into a story that will be told for years to come.
Thank you, Chalmers. It's moments like these that remind me just how important a sense of humor can be. especially in the kitchen.
Absolutely, Skinner. And as we reflect on this culinary journey, let's not forget the lesson here. Always read the recipe twice, and maybe 3 times, just to be sure.
A lesson well learned. From now on, I shall approach each new recipe with the reverence of a monk approaching the sacred texts.
And perhaps invest in a better smoke alarm. One that doesn't get quite so excited.
A very reasonable suggestion, Chalmers. From this point forward, I shall be the master of my kitchen domain, including its alarms.
Well said, Skinner. And with that, we've reached the end of our little trip down memory lane. What a night it was.
Indeed, Chalmers. A night that will go down in the annals of Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast, an evening where disaster turned into delight, or as close to delight as one can get when served chicken with a side of hot air.
A true testament to your adaptability and sense of humor, Skinner. And as we wrap up this tale of culinary woe, I think it's safe to say that our listeners have been thoroughly entertained.
Yes, Chalmers. And as we continue this podcast, let's hope that my future cooking endeavors are a little more subdued.
Let's just say I'll be keeping an eye on your next culinary adventures. Skinner, may they be as eventful and entertaining as the Praja incident.
Well, Chalmers, it seems that our listeners have gotten quite the dose of Skinner's kitchen capers for one episode.
Indeed they have, Skinner. And with that, we'll leave our listeners with a hearty laugh and a newfound appreciation for the art of cooking and the importance of reading ingredient lists carefully.
Exactly, Chalmers. But there is even more. After all that Praja story, dear listeners, came the moment that I'll dub as the Big Bang of baking. A moment so intense, so fiery, that it would go down in our household history as the night Mrs. Cuomo Chalmers became one with the Praja.
Yes. The night I transformed into a human volcano, courtesy of your culinary experiment, Skinner. It was a sight to behold, if I do say so myself.
A human volcano. That's quite the vivid description, Chalmers, I must admit. I've never had a dish react quite like that before.
Well, when you add an ingredient that's essentially liquid fire to a recipe and stir it with the fervor of a culinary mad scientist, what do you expect?
A culinary masterpiece, I suppose, or at least that was the plan before the project decided to turn into a hot, spicy lava flow right before our very eyes.
I remember feeling a warmth spread across my face, followed by a sensation that can only be described as standing too close to an open oven for an extended period of time.
And that's when things got explosive. The kitchen was filled with the sound of sizzling and steaming, and there you were, in the midst of it all, fully engulfed by the fiery embrace of the project.
It was like a scene from a bad action movie. There I was, a lone chef, dodging flying spices and splatters of hot oil, or while trying to salvage what little was left of my dinner.
I watched in horror, and, admittedly, a small amount of fascination. As you became one with the dish, your skin took on a new level of texture and your outfit got an unexpected flavor profile upgrade.
Yes, I became the first, and hopefully last, person to ever wear a dish as clothing. It was quite the experience, let me tell you.
So, Chalmers, what was going through your mind in the heat of the moment? Or should I say the heat of the project?
Well, for one, I was thinking about how important it is to follow recipes precisely. But beyond that, I was also marveling at the sheer power of spices and your culinary creativity.
Indeed, Chalmers. It's a testament to the fact that not all who wield a spatula in the kitchen are created equal. Some of us have yet to master the art of not turning our meals into volcanic eruptions.
Oh, Skinner, I think you've finally found your calling. As a pioneer in the field of experimental cuisine, where the only expectation is to expect the unexpected.
Well, if my kitchen experiments can bring a bit of laughter and entertainment to our listeners, then perhaps it was all worth it. Even the explosive part.
Absolutely, Skinner. And let's not forget the lesson here. Always wear heat-resistant attire when experimenting with new recipe, or at least stand clear of the kitchen counter.
A very reasonable suggestion, Chalmers. And as we continue to recount this culinary adventure, let's remember that it could have been much worse. Like a kitchen fire, for example. Something very rare in this house. Something very rare in this house.
You'd indeed, Skinner. Relieved it could have been a disaster of epic proportions, but instead, it became a story that we'll laugh about for years to come.
And yes, Chalmers. And as we wrap up this tale of culinary woe, I must say that it's been quite the journey. One that has brought us closer together, or at least closer to understanding each other's limits in the kitchen.
Absolutely, Skinner. And speaking of limits, I think it's time we set some new boundaries for our future cooking endeavors. Perhaps involving a fire extinguisher and a clear exit strategy.
A very prudent plan, Chalmers. From this point forward, I vow to approach each new culinary challenge with a level head, and maybe even a fire suit for good measure.
A fire suit sounds like a splendid idea, Skinner. After all, who needs the latest fashion when you can sport the newest in kitchen safety gear?
Indeed, Chalmers, I'll be the first chef to ever go viral. Not for my cooking skills, but for my impeccable sense of personal safety.
Well said, Skinner.
And so, dear listeners, as the kitchen turned into a live volcano, my mind raced through a spectrum of emotions. Denial was the first to greet me. It can't be that hot, right? I thought to myself as I gingerly touched the sizzling dish with the back of my hand.
Oh, Skinner, denial is a classic reaction in such situations. It's right up there with frantic Googling and the age-old I didn't do it defense.
Well, who could blame me? I mean, how often does one encounter a dish that behaves like a wayward teenager on a sugar rush?
Far too often, unfortunately. But let's not forget the moment you realized that denial wouldn't suffice, and you found yourself amidst a culinary conflagration.
Yes, Chalmers. That's when I leaped into action. Or at least, that was the plan. In reality, I stumbled to the kitchen island where I proceeded to search for any semblance of a solution on the internet. How to put out a grease fire with baking soda. I typed, my fingers trembling with each keystroke.
And let's not forget the time you spent carefully arranging every available fire extinguisher in the house around the kitchen, creating a makeshift moat of safety.
Guilty as charged. I must admit, the kitchen looked like a bomb squad had just finished a training exercise by the time I was done. My kitchen looked like a set after a Mythbusters episode.
It was quite the sight, Skinner. You stood there surrounded by fire extinguishers, a look of determination, or perhaps sheer panic etched on your face.
Yes, Chalmers, it was a sight to behold. I even considered calling the fire department, half expecting them to arrive with sirens blaring and ladders at the ready.
And what about when you tried to cover the dish with a lid only to realize that it was nowhere to be found? Your search for that missing lid was like something out of an adventure novel.
That's right. I searched high and low in every cabinet and drawer. I even considered using a colander as a last resort. Imagine the headlines, Local Chef Foils Kitchen Volcano with Pasta Strainer.
It would have been quite the culinary coup, Skinner, but alas, it was not to be. Still, your efforts were nothing if not creative.
Indeed, Chalmers. In hindsight, it's almost comical. Here I was, a trained professional reduced to a frantic Google search and lidless pot stirring.
Oh, Skinner, every chef has their off days, even the ones who don't spontaneously combust their meal. It's all part of the learning experience.
A very fair point, Chalmers. And as we reflect on this culinary mishap, let's take solace in the fact that it ended well. No fire department necessary and no permanent damage done, aside from my reputation, of course. Remember, listeners, cover the pot with a metal lid if there is a grease fire. Fire cannot exist in the absence of oxygen. Or pour on baking soda only if the fire is small.
Absolutely, Skinner. And who knows? Perhaps this incident will inspire a new line of kitchen safety gear specifically designed for the aspiring chef who has everything, including a penchant for inadvertent culinary explosions.
A line of Skinner-proof kitchenware, perhaps? I can already see the commercial. Don't let your dinner turn into a disaster. Skinner's safety gear. Because when it comes to cooking, better safe than sorry.
Now that's an idea worth exploring, Skinner. After all, if you can't beat them, join them, and in this case, them is a hot, spicy dish with a flair for the dramatic.
Well then, Chalmers, I suppose it's time to embrace my new role as the pioneer of kitchen safety, or at least until I master the art of not setting my kitchen on fire. Setting my kitchen on fire.
The role you seem destined to play, Skinner.
And so again, dear listeners, after the smoke cleared and my heart rate returned to something resembling normalcy, I found myself in quite the predicament. The Praja incident had left a mark, or rather a distinct lack of mark, as the dish had mysteriously lost its fiery glow.
Oh, Skinner, every chef has their off days. Yours just happened to come with a bit more. Flair, what was your plan to cover up this little kitchen conflagration?
Well, Chalmers, I devised a master plan. Or at least what I thought was a master plan at the time. I decided to turn lemons into lemonade, or in this case, a happy cakes to celebrate the non-event of a successfully extinguished kitchen fire.
A happy cake, you say? I must admit, that's one way to ensure the spotlight is on something other than the charred remnants of your culinary creation.
Indeed, Chalmers, I figured if we could just forget the whole incident ever happened and focus on a sweet treat, then perhaps my reputation could emerge unscathed, or at least less scorched.
And so you baked away your sins, literally and figuratively, under the guise of a happy cake. A clever ruse. Skinner, though I must admit, the sight of you frosting a cake with an industrial-sized fire extinguisher in hand was quite the spectacle.
Well, Chalmers, one does have to improvise in such situations. Besides, who wouldn't want their dessert frosted with a touch of kitchen safety flair?
Only you, Skinner. Only you. Your culinary ignorance is matched only by your ingenuity. Or perhaps the other way around.
Let's not forget, Chalmers, that every challenge is an opportunity in disguise, and in this case, the opportunity was to become a culinary safety innovator, or at least to give it a good try.
Indeed, Skinner. And as we look back on this incident with a mix of amusement and relief, let's not forget the lesson here. Always read the recipe, and perhaps invest in a second fire extinguisher, just in case.
A very fair point, Chalmers, and as we continue to recount this culinary adventure, let's remember that it could have been much worse. Like if I had actually tried to use the colander as a lid.
Oh, the image of you holding a colander over a sizzling dish is one for the ages, Skinner. A true testament to your adaptability and resourcefulness in the kitchen.
Yes, Chalmers, a colander lid. Who needs professional culinary advice when you have kitchenware that's ready for anything?
Indeed, Skinner. And speaking of resourcefulness, let's not forget your happy cake. It was quite the confectionery creation, though I must admit the frosting did have an interesting aftertaste, one that reminded me of fire extinguisher powder.
Well, Chalmers, one can't blame a chef for trying to turn a mishap into a masterpiece, even if that masterpiece tastes a bit like a public safety announcement.
A very unique flavor, to be sure. But let's not dwell on the taste. Instead, let's celebrate your resourcefulness and the fact that in the end, the kitchen, and more importantly, our listeners, remained unscathed.
Absolutely, Chalmers. And as we wrap up this tale of culinary chaos and kitchen capers, let's take a moment to appreciate the irony of it all. You would have thought that a dish with the potential to be a disaster would end up bringing us closer together.
Yes, Skinner, and in the world of Skinner and Chalmers' weekly roast, every mishap is an opportunity for laughter, learning, and the occasional happy cake.
Well, Chalmers, let's get back to another topic. The spicy food I served you that night when I saw your face turning that particular shade of red. No, more like a violet crimson. I thought this is it. This is how it ends for Chalmers. And all because of that goddamn spicy food I made. That was already planning your funeral in my head, you know.
My funeral, Skinner. Over a bit of spice? I mean, sure, I was teetering on the edge of consciousness, but come on, you really thought I'd kick the bucket from your questionable culinary experiments?
You don't understand, Chalmers. You looked like you were about to explode. I was honestly terrified. I imagined myself standing at your gravesite saying something like, "He was a great man, taken too soon by a rogue jalapeno."
Oh, Skinner, that's rich. I can just see you now, sobbing dramatically, and probably holding a pot of that same devilish stew, insisting it was your best batch yet.
I mean, you have to admit it was almost poetic. A lifetime of giving me grief over my cooking, and in the end, it would have been my cooking that did you in.
I'll give you poetic, all right. What did you call that monstrosity again? Was it supposed to be chili or some sort of lava-based soup? Because it sure felt like molten rock going down. Probably something for Krakatoa, but not humans.
Let's not quibble about the details of a dish. Yes, I may have gone overboard with the spices, but who knew you'd be so delicate?
Delicate. Skinner, I've survived years of school budget meetings, field trips, and your cafeteria's infamous meatloaf. I'm not what you'd call delicate, but that concoction of yours, it was a culinary landmine.
Oh, I know. I pushed it too far, but in my defense, I thought you like a little kick in your food. How was I supposed to know your tolerance for heat, topped out at mildly peppered mashed potatoes?
Mildly peppered mashed potatoes. Skinner, if you ever serve me that, I'll know you've finally given up on life. Oh, come to think of it, it would be a refreshing change of pace from your usual attempts to assault my taste buds.
I resent that. I'll have you know I've been working hard on improving my cooking skills. It's not all burnt roast beef and rubbery chicken, as you love to call it.
Oh, sure, Skinner. You've been improving. That's why the last time I was over, you served what I can only describe as spaghetti surprise. Surprise being the operative word, considering the noodles were somehow crunchy and soggy at the same time.
I really thought you liked that one. I spent hours perfecting the sauce, but that's not the point. The point is, I really did think you were a goner, Chalmers. My whole life flashed before my eyes when you started coughing like that.
Your life? I'm the one who was staring down death. My life was the one flashing before me. Mostly images of all the terrible lunches I've had to endure over the years. And then I thought, this is how it ends. Not with a bang, but with a chili pepper.
Oh, come on, you're exaggerating. A little water, and you were fine.
Water, that makes things actually worse. Better use some whole wheat bread. Skinner, I'm pretty sure I saw flames shooting out of my mouth. If I had breathed in your general direction, I might have incinerated you right there in your kitchen.
How? I would have been honored to go out that way, blazed to a crisp by Chalmers' fiery breath. What a way to be remembered.
Oh yes, what an obituary that would be. beloved principal turned to ash by his boss, who was tragically assaulted by a particularly aggressive chili. We could call it death by Skinner's spicy soup. Maybe it'd be the start of a new school legend.
The students would probably start daring each other to eat my leftovers. Survive the Skinner special and you win eternal glory.
Or a trip to the hospital. Either way, they'll be telling stories about it for years. You'll be the school's culinary boogeyman.
Oh, don't remind me. It's already bad enough that they whisper about my cooking behind my back. I don't need to give them more ammunition.
Wait, are you telling me you actually care about what the students think of your food?
Well, yes. I put a lot of effort into those lunches, even if it doesn't always go according to plan. Do you think I like being the butt of all their jokes?
I just assumed you'd grown immune to it by now. I mean, after years of criticism, even the thickest gravy should roll right off your back.
Criticism is one thing, Chalmers. But when it starts feeling personal, like, oh, Skinner can't even boil water without setting off the fire alarms, it starts to sting a little.
Oh, come on, Skinner. You got thick skin, tougher than any overcooked roast you've served. Besides, think of it this way. You've made a name for yourself. People know you for your cooking, even if it's for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I suppose there's some truth to that. Infamy is better than obscurity, right?
Exactly. No one will ever forget Skinner's specials. You've left a mark, Skinner, albeit a slightly charred one.
You know, I hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe there's some pride in being known as the culinary daredevil of Memafield Elementary.
That's the spirit. But maybe next time, aim for memorable in a good way, like not poisoning your boss with incendiary food.
That didn't poison you. It was just a little spice. Besides, you're still here, aren't you?
Barely. I was clinging to life like a kid clings to their last slice of pizza on pizza day. Speaking of which, remind me to talk to you about adding that to the menu more often. It's one of the few safe bets at this point.
Fine. Pizza's safe, I suppose. But where's the thrill in that? Where's the challenge?
The challenge. Skinner, not everything needs to be a test of endurance. You know, sometimes I'd settle for a meal I can eat without having to mentally prepare myself for war.
You know what they say, Chalmers? No pain, no gain. You've got to keep pushing the limits, even in the kitchen. Besides, think of it as a team-building exercise.
A team-building exercise where one member of the team narrowly escapes a spice-induced coma. That's a new one, Skinner. You should write a book on leadership. The School of Hard Spices.
Now there's an idea, Chapter 1. Survival of the spiciest.
And Chapter 2. How not to lose your job when your boss nearly chokes on your cooking.
Hey, I didn't lose my job, did I? In fact, I'd argue we're closer because of this.
Closer? More like I'm warier of any invitations to dinner at your place. Next time I get an invite, I'm bringing my own sandwich, just in case.
Oh, come on, Chalmers. You can't be afraid forever. You've got to take risks. It's how relationships grow stronger, isn't it?
Risks are one thing, Skinner, but I'm not sure about putting my life on the line every time we sit down for a meal. Maybe we should take a break from your more experimental dishes.
Experimental? Please, I call it creative. I'm like a culinary pioneer blazing trails where no one else dares to tread.
Right into the danger zone, apparently. You know, Skinner, I think the power dynamic between us has shifted after this whole ordeal.
Shifted? How do you figure?
Well, before, you were just the principal and my husband, and I was your superior and your husband, ordering you around at work, keeping you in check at home. But now I have to tread carefully. One wrong word, and who knows what you'll serve me next.
Ah, so I have the upper hand now, is that what you're saying?
Let's not get carried away. I wouldn't say you have the upper hand. More like an advantage. A spicy, unpredictable advantage.
I like the sound of that. It's nice to know I can keep you on your toes. It keeps things interesting, don't you think?
Interesting? That's one word for it. Another word might be terrifying, but sure, let's go with interesting.
You see, this is what makes our relationship so dynamic. You never know what's coming next. Keeps us both sharp.
Sharp indeed. Well, as long as it's not too sharp. I'd prefer to avoid any more near-death experiences, thank you very much.
Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. Maybe just a little danger keeps things exciting.
Exciting? I think we've had enough excitement for one lifetime, Skinner. How about a nice, safe salad next time?
A salad? Where's the fun in that?
Fun isn't the priority here, Skinner. Survival is.
Fine. I'll make you a salad, but don't blame me if it's too bland for your taste.
Bland? How? You know what? After what I've been through, I'll take bland any day of the week.
Well, Chalmers, you're no fun, dear listeners. As we reach the end of today's podcast, I find myself reminiscing about the fiery events that unfolded in my kitchen. It seems that every disaster is a treasure trove of learning opportunities, especially when it comes to following recipes.
Indeed, Skinner. Who would have thought that your culinary adventure would teach us all the importance of reading two and not two labels on spice jars?
Yes. The fine art of label interpretation, a skill I aim to master after this enlightening experience. I suppose it's a good thing that our kitchen escapades make for such entertaining stories.
Oh, Skinner, your culinary mishaps are the bread and butter of our podcast. Quite literally, they provide us with the perfect blend of humor and education, much like a well-seasoned dish.
Thank you, Chalmers. And while I may not yet be a master chef, I can at least say that I've learned to appreciate the simplicity of a well-prepared salad, even if it is a bit on the bland side.
A well-earned appreciation for simplicity, Skinner. And let's not forget, your handling of the situation was nothing short of heroic. Who else would have thought to use a happy cakes as a peace offering after a culinary catastrophe?
Heroic? Perhaps that's a bit of an overstatement, Chalmers, but I do take pride in my ability to adapt and overcome, even when faced with a kitchen fire.
Overstatement or not, Skinner, your resilience is commendable. And as we reflect on this experience, let's remember the most important lesson of all. Always read the recipe and perhaps keep a fire extinguisher handy.
It's a lesson well learned, Chalmers, and one that I shall endeavor to never forget, at least when it comes to cooking.
Indeed, Skinner. And speaking of lessons, let's not forget the bond we share. No fiery dish could ever break that.
True, Chalmers. Our bond is as indestructible as a cast iron skillet, though I hope our future culinary adventures are a bit less eventful.
I hope I share wholeheartedly, Skinner. After all, who wouldn't enjoy a peaceful meal without the added excitement of a kitchen fire?
A peaceful meal it shall be, Chalmers. And to our listeners, we promise that next week's episode will be less explosive and more edible.
Edible indeed. We look forward to sharing another delightful installment of Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast with you all.
Until then, listeners, keep your kitchen safe and your spices labeled. And remember, in the world of Skinner and Chalmers, every day is an opportunity to learn something new, preferably before the dish is served.
Farewell, dear listeners. May your kitchens be fire-free and your recipes clear. We'll see you next week with more culinary tales, hopefully without any further explosion.